Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Energility Connecting the Dots. This is our series of webinars focusing on energy and efficiency. Uh, my name is Richard Alexu. I'm the Manager of Strategy and Business Development here at Energility. And some of our recent webinars have focused on financing of projects or the tools that are used during energy efficiency projects. Today, we're going to dive into the top 10 insights from an energy plan. So as you follow along, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email, justin@energility.com or richard@energility.com. We'll be happy to respond to all of those. Or if you have any topics in mind for future episodes, by all means, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, let me introduce the presenter for the day, Justin Kale, our Director of Opportunity Development here at Energility. But Justin, quick question before we go. Is this top 10 list going to be more like Sports Center with slow motion replays and sound effects, or more like David Letterman with a drum roll?
I hope it could be a fraction of the entertainment that both of those provide.
Let's go.
I think we'll stick with sharing some of the good stuff about what we find, what we deal with, and some of those insights and results from the energy plans. It almost does seem like we, with the top 10, we need some sort of, some sort of walk-up music. But absent the walk-up music and the stunning hosts that we are not, then we'll just dig in to try to connect the dots for folks on what happens with an energy plan. That work for you?
That works. So good deal. And when we revisit the top 10, if we have any revisions a month or a year down the road, maybe we'll bring in the walk-up music.
Add the walk-up music.
And the strobe lights.
Yeah. So let's hit the numbers. Let's look at that top 10, and we're going to approach this first from the perspective of, what we've been doing for the last decade, and some of us much longer. So our, collective experiences, hundreds of years in buildings. And over the last 10 years, we've done a couple hundred of these detailed energy plans, right? So just looking at some of the findings that we've obtained, operational and best practices, things simply like tracking use and, weather stripping that's sometimes visible. Other times, you're scanning it with an infrared camera. But 90% of the time, we're finding lighting, heating, and building controls. Those are the things that a lot of times, with this presentation, there's not a lot of brain surgery or rocket science or whatever analogy you want to use. There's a lot of stuff that you would probably expect. Hopefully you get a nugget or two of new knowledge out of this. But there are other things that we find from, updating building envelope, adding insulation, replacing cooling systems. Those are usually really big pieces of equipment, big capital costs. And in some facilities, if they're doing good controls, it doesn't generate the amount of savings that they anticipate. Sometimes we've had houses of worship that go, hey, this is my biggest piece of equipment. It's got to be the thing that's using my most energy. And really, they're doing good thermostat management, and it isn't the big problem factor. So let's look at, number one. Most of these top 10 lists go in the regression. So there's this big crescendo at number one, and it's a big surprise, or there's a big unveil. But let's start with inefficient lighting. The LED is the technology of the day. Seems like that's going to be around for quite some time. And one of the biggest differentiators for LED lighting is how it gets the electricity out in the form of light into the space. So that conversion is really, really effective. So in the past, there was a statement that folks would use around incandescent lights, where they were heaters that provided some light because they gave off a lot of heat. And when you converted to compact fluorescence, you had anything from the visible, I don't like those curly Q lights and how they look, to, they flicker and things like that. the way light is done now in 2025 and the 2020s, it really is a good time to take a chance and say, hey, maybe this conference room that Rich and I are in has 3 fixtures. If we were replacing this with new LED fixtures, maybe we only need 2 fixtures in here. It's one less fixture to maintain, but it also would get a better light spread around the room. So it's a good time if you're investing in a lighting upgrade. Take time for the redesign, and don't always assume that you're going to go back with the same amount of fixtures. Heating and cooling, again, big systems, and a lot of bigger buildings, they do have some opportunity to be more efficient. But the big savings we see is simply the control. How are these systems controlled when there's no occupants in the space? How do they manage the temperature control? And also, how do they manage that capability between heating and cooling? Because some systems are set up so it can do either, like, for example, say a rooftop unit that's blowing air through the ductwork and then it's going to the different zones. Uh, you have the potential where building may have been updated in years past, and there's still a legacy heating system in place that is also providing heating as well as the cooling from that rooftop unit. And if those 2 systems are not sequenced together, you could be actually cooling the space while it's heating, and at the same time, the heating system is going to be working harder to try and heat the space. In my experience in a high-rise building, we would sometimes have people that would put personal space heaters in their office, and they'd put them right next to the thermostat, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to make the thermostat think that it's warm in here, so it'll shut off." But in the reverse, it's actually making the system work harder to cool the space, and therefore overpowers it. So that can create some of those discomfort issues and controls.
That simultaneous heating and cooling issue is usually a head scratcher for a number of building operators when they realize that that's actually going on. They don't always expect to see that.
Right. And that's something we can see when we start unpacking the data
Mhm.
beyond the utility bills. And it usually starts brimming with that conversation around where's your uncomfortable areas, or where do you have a struggle keeping people satisfied with the temperatures. That really hits 3 out of the 10 right there. Building with different levels of building control strategy. Air leaks and building envelope, sealing those can sometimes be as simple, and that's one of those things when I do business development calls and I'm walking into a building. One of the things that I try to observe either on the way in or on the way out are those doors, sealed, because that's something, a lot of our clients, they're walking through those every day. And if they just pay attention to that one aspect, that can be something that can be put on a regular maintenance check, either annually or seasonally. And sometimes they're walking by that quite a few times a day, and not necessarily addressing a concern that's letting the heat out during the wintertime, or it's letting heat in during the summertime. And that that can go a long way, not necessarily towards significant energy savings, but usually that's one of those measures that the cost of your maintenance person or the cost of the service call to make that replacement, it pays for itself within a year, sometimes 2. Poorly maintained HVAC equipment is a driver that can reduce energy consumption. If it's equipment that has been poorly maintained, a replacement equipment is going to reduce the energy consumption. Um, but also we see that not necessarily where somebody's been negligent in maintaining equipment, but it's just simply they continue to run this equipment past the design life. And I ran a high-rise building for a number of years where we didn't just go out and replace equipment because it reached the end of useful life. We had good maintenance practices in place, so it was still performing effectively and it was exceeding its useful life. When you're investing that, the penny of prevention's worth a pound of cure, analogy. When you're investing a few dollars in maintenance, that can go a long way towards saving thousands of dollars in capital costs. And the maintenance usually is 75, 80, maybe even 90% of the life cycle cost of a piece of equipment. So adding a few extra dollars in for maintenance can save having to replace equipment at the end of its useful life, and you can extend it, which if you don't have to spend money, that's a dream for a real estate owner or an organization running a building.
Sure.
So keeping that equipment maintained, make sure that whatever the efficiency that you installed it at is sustained over the life or past the life of the equipment. And when we're talking about that equipment, and most of the time we're talking about heating and cooling equipment specifically. Uh, this equipment is designed for a space condition at the time it's installed. And many times over the life of a building, decades, that equipment could still be in place, but the space use gets changed. Offices become large conference areas, or we've seen trends over the years where uh, everybody gets an office space, and then it shifts 5, 6, 7, 10 years later where there's a few offices and then there's big open office environments. So with all of those iterations of change, it's not always the common practice to update the airflow designs, update the equipment that's that's delivering conditioned air for those spaces. And many times we find, and especially in uh, schools or churches and nonprofits, houses of worship, we'll find that there was a plan that they're doing in phases, and something happens between phase A and phase B, or phase one and phase two, and that expansion didn't happen, or it didn't happen the way they thought it was going to. So this equipment that they oversized, because they're like, hey, in 5 years we're going to add a new wing of classrooms. Well, that classrooms never came. We saw this a number of years ago with a house of worship that had a heating system, a boiler that was almost double the size that it needed to be. Well, they were anticipating running that boiler to the classroom wings for the education building that ultimately was built, but the way they built it with their own heating plant for the school. And so then this boiler was left oversized, running for the sanctuary and the offices. And so it was doing a lot of cycling, and it created a lot of energy waste that was all because that expansion just didn't happen the way they'd originally planned it. And one of the simple things that's found during an energy plan, and probably uh, maybe it really should be number one on our list, some of the easiest ways to reduce energy consumption is to manage it. And you can manage it when you measure it, which comes through the energy plan. But that starts with the awareness of, hey, where are we at? And a lot of folks know what their dollars and cents are, but they don't always necessarily correlate that to, hey, my supply contract is up for electric or gas, or am I even able to purchase my own electric and gas supply? And that's been happening here in Ohio for the better part of the last 17 years or so. And there's still, we actually just ran into a house of worship here a couple weeks ago that over the last 17 years they'd never had a supply contract, and that was just something they were unaware of. Their pastor simply told me, we actually go ahead and shut the church down for a couple weeks if we have to be able to keep paying the bill, because it does get out of hand sometimes. So, and really just that target that we use, because there's a lot of literature, a lot of study, and what we see repetitively is, if you just simply look at what's the energy use, roughly 5%, and that's a good starting point. Is 5% could be reduced just by simply paying attention.
Yeah, this goes back to are my energy bills just bills that I have to pay, or can I manage them strategically like an asset and find the best way to make use of my dollars on it? So exactly. I love this.
Right. Good point. Good insight. And one of the things, and I know Rich is a big advocate for this, is we have to identify what's going on in the building and what needs to be improved. But one of the things we also need to make sure we don't lose sight of, and we ensure as we have some of our internal dialogues, how are best practices being applied? Are there ones that they're already doing? Again, a lot of our clients, you saw in that first slide, not 100% of our clients needed a lighting retrofit. Well, and that's because a lot of clients are starting to move, or folks say, hey, I've already replaced my lights to LEDs. I need you to help me figure out what's next. And so in some cases, there are things that they've done or things that they have in practice, green teams, et cetera, that are delivering results. So it's important in building an energy plan to quantify those, or at least talk to those, so that those are acknowledged, and that provides a little wind in the sails, so to speak, to keep them moving further down the journey of energy management. And at the end of the day, our number 10 on our list, again, these are not necessarily in a quantitative or qualitative order, but number 10 on our list is really building the energy plan is one way of learning. And when we're listening and giving some reflections, and when our clients are talking about their buildings, there becomes some of those aha moments, whether it's from the way we frame some of the questions about their building or some of the dialogue that's had. You get a different perspective on, and that's part of the energy plan, is being able to build that actionable report, so that you can say, hey, not only am I taking advantage of things that they've done and learned, because our clients have taken action in some cases over the years, that they say, hey, we tried replacing the air compressors before and it just didn't work, or there was maybe there's poor design that was applied to a system, so they're a little hesitant to move forward with some sort of building controls upgrade. Some of those lessons of the past can be learned from by themselves through this experience of field study and dialogue and analysis and a report. And some of it can be, the lessons that we've learned from our decades of building experience, being able to impart those in our reports, but also with the dialogue and, shepherding our clients through the process of building an energy plan. So, that's our top 10 insights from an energy plan. So, Rich, as we're connecting the dots for folks as we wind up here, I think these are 4 good points to summarize.
Mm-hmm.
We've got good news to share. There's things that they're doing well, and I can't think of one of our clients that isn't doing something, at least, taking some steps forward. So identifying the good as well as what needs improved.
They need to hear what they're doing well, so that they can continue to do it, or not spend time pondering, do I need to cut back on this?
Yeah. The old analysis paralysis that gets us all.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the findings that we establish are low enough cost that those could fit into operating budgets that are already in place. It's just reappropriating those funds, or the contingency funds that they have in place for the year. Those can be appropriated for things that would reduce energy consumption and costs.
Exactly. And we want to get in front of that and let you know, so that you can take those on right away and get some immediate savings.
Absolutely. And there's also a way to identify and measure through the course of delivering the energy plan. And that's the best way that you can expect some level of result in the future, rather than just saying, we're going to budget for this because it's the oldest piece of equipment, or it's the next oldest piece of equipment. And a lot of folks do their capital planning in that manner, where they simply say, what's the oldest thing? Let's go ahead and replace that next. And that may not necessarily be the thing that's going to save you the most dollars, save you the most energy, or be the most effective for the operation.
Mm-hmm.
And with the energy plan output, the report and the dialogue, we're prioritizing capital plans, but also how are these funds in your operating budget being appropriated, so there could be some potential recommendations that are operational in nature, low cost, using that staff. And so it's a combination of capital planning as well as, day to day, month to month, year to year operational action items.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So great. We hope you found this useful. I know we did enjoy putting this together for you, and we'd like to continue doing things just like this. So remember, you can always find us here um, at YouTube/Energility, or just search for Energility, and you'll see our library of previous videos. We would love to hear from you, Richard at Energility, Justin at Energility. Shoot us a message. We'll get back to you, and we'll be back next month with a new one. And thank you very much. Keep on saving. Every watt counts. Have a great day. Take care.
Nice work.
Back at you.